With her swollen belly bound to the sacrificial stone, Sarah locked eyes with the Apache chief's son who had saved her from death, only to deliver her to the ritual altar. Blood-red ceremonial paint marked Takoda's anguished face as he gripped the sacred knife, trapped between tribal duty and the woman whose unborn child now carried both their futures. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. Arizona Territory, 1876. The merciless summer sun bore down upon the red earth of Monument Valley, scorching everything in its path with unforgiving intensity. Heat rose in visible waves from the cracked soil, distorting the distant mesas that stood like ancient sentinels against the cloudless sky. In this harsh landscape, where even the hardiest desert creatures sought shelter during the day's peak heat, a solitary figure stumbled forward, each step more uncertain than the last. Sarah Mitchell pressed one hand against her swollen belly and used the other to shield her eyes from the blinding glare. Her once white cotton dress, now stained with dust and sweat, clung to her slender frame, doing little to conceal her 5-month pregnancy. Her lips, cracked and bleeding, moved in silent prayer as she forced herself to continue walking, though her strength was nearly gone. "Just a little further," she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible over the sound of the wind as it whispered through the sparse sagebrush. Just until nightfall. 3 days ago, her stepfather had driven her to the outskirts of Copper Springs and left her there with nothing but a small bundle of provisions and the clothes on her back. His final words still rang in her ears, sharp as the crack of his wagon whip. "You've brought nothing but shame to this family, girl. If you won't marry Thomas and give that child a proper name, then you're no daughter of mine." Sarah had stood in stunned silence as the wagon disappeared in a cloud of dust, leaving her alone with the child growing inside her. A child whose father had shown his true nature with his fists long before he'd abandoned her himself. She would rather face the desert alone than bind herself to such a man for life. Now, as the sun began its slow descent toward the western horizon, Sarah knew she had made a terrible miscalculation. The water in her canteen had run dry hours ago, and the distant trading post she'd hoped to reach seemed no closer than it had that morning, her vision blurred, dark spots dancing at the edges of her sight. "Please, Lord," she prayed, one hand protectively cradling her belly, "not my baby. Take me if you must, but spare my child." As if in answer, her knees buckled beneath her. Sarah collapsed onto the hard-packed earth, the small cloud of dust raised by her fall settling over her like a shroud. The world spun around her as consciousness began to slip away. In her delirium, she thought she heard hoofbeats approaching. A shadow fell across her face, blocking the punishing sun. Through half-closed eyes, she caught a glimpse of a figure dismounting from a horse, tall, copper-skinned, with long black hair that gleamed in the sunlight. "Water," she managed to whisper before darkness claimed her. Takoda had been tracking a wounded deer since dawn, following the sparse blood trail across the sacred hunting grounds of his people. Son of Chief Maka of the Chiricahua Apache, he preferred to hunt alone, away from the watchful eyes of the tribal elders who expected nothing short of perfection from their future leader. He had just spotted fresh tracks when his horse, Wanagiska, suddenly tensed, ears pricked forward. Takoda followed the animal's gaze and spotted something out of place against the red earth, something pale and motionless. Approaching cautiously, his hand instinctively moving to the knife at his belt, Takoda was surprised to find not an animal, but a white woman. She lay crumpled on the ground, her fair hair spread like spun gold against the crimson soil. Her face was burned by the sun, her lips parched and split from dehydration, but it was the gentle swell of her abdomen that gave him pause. She carried a child. For a moment, he hesitated. Relations between his people and the white settlers had grown increasingly tense over the past months. The soldiers from Fort Bowie were pushing deeper into Apache territory, and rumors of broken treaties spread through the camps like wildfire. To help a white woman, especially one who had strayed so close to sacred Apache grounds, would be seen as a betrayal by many in his tribe. And yet, as he looked upon her still form, Takoda could not bring himself to leave her to die. There was no honor in abandoning a mother and her unborn child to the merciless desert, regardless of the color of her skin. When she whispered for water, he knelt beside her, cradling her head as he tipped his water skin to her cracked lips. She drank greedily, coughing as she tried to take too much at once. "Slowly," he cautioned in English, a language he had learned from a missionary years before. "Too much will make you sick." Her eyes fluttered open, revealing irises the color of the summer sky just before dusk. Fear flickered across her face as she registered his appearance, the red ochre symbols painted on his cheeks for the hunt, the eagle feather tied into his black hair, the buckskin clothing that marked him as Apache. "Please," she whispered, her voice raw and desperate. "My baby." "Be still," Takoda replied, his voice gentle but firm. "You are safe." He knew even as he spoke that his words might prove false. If he brought this woman back to his people, there would be consequences. The tribal council would demand answers. His father, torn between his role as chief and his love for his son, would be forced to make difficult decisions. But as the woman slipped back into unconsciousness, her hand still protectively curved around her swollen belly, Takoda made his choice. Carefully, he lifted her onto Wanagiska's back, securing her limp form before mounting behind her. "Forgive me, father," he murmured to the wind as he turned his horse toward the Apache camp, hidden in the valley beyond the sacred buttes. "And I could not leave her to die." The setting sun cast long shadows across the desert as Takoda rode, his precious burden cradled against his chest, unknowingly setting in motion events that would forever change both their worlds. The Apache camp lay nestled in a hidden valley, sheltered by towering red rock formations that seemed to touch the darkening sky. As Takoda approached, the warm glow of cooking fires flickered between the scattered teepees, and the scent of pine smoke hung in the evening air. Children who had been playing among the dwellings stopped to stare as he rode in with the unconscious white woman cradled before him, their curious eyes widening at the sight of her pale skin and golden hair. Warriors emerged from their teepees, hands instinctively moving to their weapons. Women gathered their children close, hushed whispers spreading through the camp like wind through dry grass. Takoda kept his back straight, his expression betraying nothing of the uncertainty that churned within him. He had made his choice, and now he would face the consequences. "Takoda returns," called out a young boy, his voice carrying through the suddenly silent camp. "He brings a white woman." Chief Maka emerged from his large teepee at the center of the camp, his weathered face creased with concern. Unlike his son, who wore only the markings of a hunter, the chief's face bore the sacred symbols of leadership, intricate patterns of red ochre that spoke of wisdom, courage, and his direct connection to the spirits. His long black hair, streaked with silver, was adorned with eagle feathers and bone beads that signified his many accomplishments. Takoda halted his horse before his father and met the older man's gaze with respectful defiance. "What is this, my son?" Chief Maka asked in their native tongue, his deep voice carrying the weight of authority. His dark eyes moved from Takoda to the unconscious woman, his expression unreadable. "And she was dying in the desert, Father," Takoda replied, switching to Apache so that all around them could understand. "She carries a child. I could not leave them to perish." Nahimana, the elderly medicine woman, pushed through the gathering crowd, her gnarled hands clutching her walking stick. Despite her advanced age, her eyes remained sharp as obsidian, missing nothing as she surveyed the scene before her. "Bring her to my lodge," she commanded, thumping her stick against the ground for emphasis. "Quickly, before the spirits that hover between life and death claim her." Takoda dismounted, carefully lifting Sarah's limp form into his arms. Her head lolled against his chest, her breathing shallow but steady. As he carried her toward Nahimana's tipi, a tall, broad-shouldered warrior stepped into his path, his face darkened with anger. "Have you lost your mind, Takoda?" hissed Hototo, his voice low but fierce. As the chief's most trusted warrior and advisor, Hototo had never hidden his ambition or his disapproval of Mahka's more peaceful policies toward the white settlers. "You bring one of them into our sacred camp?" "The same people who steal our land and slaughter our brothers. She is one woman, Hototo," Takoda replied evenly, though his muscles tensed in anticipation of a confrontation. "And she carries an innocent child. Would you have me leave them to die?" "Better one death than to risk many," Hototo retorted, his hand resting meaningfully on the knife at his belt. "The whites bring nothing but disease and destruction. This woman could be a spy, or worse." "Enough!" Chief Mahka's authoritative voice cut through the tension. "Takoda, take the woman to Nahimana. Hototo, gather the council. We will discuss this matter when the stars have fully emerged." Hototo's jaw clenched, but he stepped aside, allowing Takoda to pass. The crowd parted silently, many faces showing fear, others curiosity, and some, particularly among the younger warriors who followed Hototo, undisguised hostility. Inside Nahimana's tipi, the air was thick with the scent of medicinal herbs and burning sage. The old woman directed Takoda to lay Sarah on a bed of soft furs near the central fire pit, where the flames cast dancing shadows across her pale face. "She is with child," Takoda explained as Nahimana bent over Sarah, her wrinkled hands hovering above the younger woman's swollen belly. "I have eyes, son of Mahka," the medicine woman replied dryly. The child stirs within her, fighting for life just as its mother does. She placed her palm gently on Sarah's forehead, frowning at the heat she felt there. Fever grips her. "Bring me fresh water from the spring, the sacred water, not what we use for cooking." As Takoda turned to leave, Nahimana caught his arm, her grip surprisingly strong for one so aged. "You have set dangerous events in motion, young one," she said softly, her eyes boring into his. "The council will not look kindly on this." "I know," Takoda acknowledged, meeting her gaze steadily. "But I could not leave her to die." "No," Nahimana agreed with a small, knowing smile. "You could not. It is not in your nature to abandon those in need, even when wisdom might counsel otherwise." She released his arm and turned back to her patient. "Now go, the water, quickly." Outside, the camp had erupted into heated discussion. Takoda hurried to the sacred spring that bubbled from the rock at the far edge of the valley, filling a clay pot with the clear, cool water that was said to carry the blessing of the ancestors. As he knelt by the spring, he caught sight of his reflection in the still water beyond the bubbling source. His own face, painted with the ochre markings of a hunter, stared back at him, seemingly asking a silent question. Had he done the right thing? Or had he, in his compassion, brought danger to his people? When Takoda returned to Nahimana's tipi, he found Sarah awake, though clearly disoriented. She had pressed herself against the far wall of the dwelling, her blue eyes wide with fear as she stared at the medicine woman who was crushing herbs in a small stone mortar. "Stay back," Sarah warned, her voice trembling despite her attempt to sound firm. One hand shielded her pregnant belly protectively, while the other gripped a small bone knife she had found among Nahimana's belongings. "Don't touch me!" Nahimana merely continued her work, unperturbed by the threat. She spoke to Takoda without looking up. "The white woman woke while you were gone. She does not understand that I am trying to help her." Takoda set down the water and approached Sarah slowly, his hands raised to show he meant no harm. "No one here will hurt you," he said in English, his accent thick but his words clear. "This is Nahimana, our medicine woman. She wants to bring down your fever and give you strength." Sarah's eyes darted to his face, recognition flickering in their depths. You found me in the desert," she said, the knife in her hand wavering slightly. "You gave me water." "Yes," Takoda confirmed with a slight nod. "My name is Takoda. I brought you to our camp because you needed help." "Where am I?" Sarah asked, her gaze moving uncertainly between Takoda and Nahimana. The old woman had begun to hum softly as she worked, a haunting melody that seemed to vibrate in the very air around them. "You are in the camp of the Chiricahua Apache," Takoda explained, kneeling a respectful distance from her. "In the valley of the Ancient Ones, beyond the Red Buttes." Sarah swallowed hard, her grip on the knife tightening. She had heard stories of the Apache, brutal tales told around campfires about scalping and torture, about settlers found with arrows through their hearts. And yet, this man had saved her life when he could have easily taken it. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Audrey, why did you help me?" Before Takoda could answer, the teepee flap was pushed aside and Chief Maka entered, his imposing figure silhouetted against the night sky. Sarah gasped, the knife falling from her suddenly nerveless fingers as she beheld the Apache chief in his full regalia. "Uri, my son," Maka addressed Takoda, though his eyes remained fixed on Sarah. "The council awaits us both." He switched to English, his pronunciation careful and deliberate as he addressed the white woman. "You will stay here. Nahimana will care for you until we return." Takoda rose to his feet, straightening his shoulders as he prepared to face the tribal council and defend his actions. As he followed his father out of the teepee, he cast one last glance at Sarah, who sat trembling among the firs, her eyes wide with uncertainty and fear. The judgment of the council would determine both their fates. The council fire blazed high in the center of the stone circle, its flames casting long shadows across the faces of the tribal elders who sat in solemn judgment. 12 men, each bearing the marks of wisdom and experience, scars from battles long past, the weathered lines of countless suns, the steady gaze of those who had witnessed both peace and bloodshed, formed a semicircle around the fire. Chief Maka sat at the center, his face impassive as he listened to the heated debate that had raged for nearly an hour. Takoda stood before them, his posture straight and proud despite the weight of their scrutiny. He had stated his case simply. He had found a dying woman, pregnant and alone, and could not in good conscience leave her to perish. It was a matter of honor, of basic humanity that transcended the boundaries between their peoples. But Hototo had spoken passionately against him, his deep voice rising and falling like thunder as he recounted the atrocities committed by white settlers against the Apache. "Have you forgotten the massacre at Sibique Creek, Hototo demanded, his eyes flashing in the firelight. "Have you forgotten our brothers and sisters slain by blue-coat soldiers, the children taken from their mothers, the sacred lands defiled by their iron horses and their endless hunger for what is not theirs?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. An elder named Kichi, his face deeply lined with age, raised a gnarled hand for silence. "The spirits have warned us," he said, his voice barely above a whisper yet carrying clearly to all present. "3 nights ago, I dreamed of a pale snake entering our camp, bringing death in its wake. And now this woman appears, with hair the color of the sun and skin white as bone." He fixed Takoda with a penetrating stare. "Some omens cannot be ignored, son of Makka. With respect, Elder Kichi," Takoda replied evenly. "I saw no snake, but a woman in need, a mother whose child has not yet drawn breath. Would the spirits who guide us have me turn my back on such suffering? Perhaps the greater mercy would have been a swift death in the desert," suggested Askuato, another of the council members. His face, half hidden behind a curtain of silver-streaked hair, betrayed little emotion, better than bringing her here, where her presence endangers us all. "She is weak, unarmed, with no tribe to support her," Takoda argued. "How does she endanger us? The white man's diseases have wiped out entire villages," Askuato countered. "Their very breath can carry death. And if she is missed, they will come looking for her with guns and torches." "She was abandoned," Takoda insisted, "left to die alone in the desert. No one searches for what they have discarded." Chief Makka, who had remained silent throughout the exchange, finally raised his hand. The council fell silent immediately, all eyes turning to their leader. "My son speaks with compassion," he began, his deep voice resonating in the night air. "Awe and compassion is a virtue we have always honored among our people, but Hototo and the elders speak with wisdom born of bitter experience." He turned to face Takoda directly. "Tell me, my son, what would you have us do with this woman once she is healed? Return her to the white settlements that cast her out? Keep her among us, where her very presence will be a constant reminder of those who seek to destroy our way of life?" Takoda hesitated, realizing he had not thought beyond saving her life. I do not know, Father, but surely we can decide her fate when that time comes. For now, she needs our help. The future is shaped by the decisions of the present," Chief Makka replied gravely. "We cannot ignore the consequences of your actions, however noble your intentions." Inside Nahimana's tipi, Sarah sat wrapped in a soft deerskin blanket, sipping cautiously from a wooden bowl of bitter herbal tea that the medicine woman had prepared. Her fever had broken, and though weakness still pervaded her limbs, her mind was clear enough to understand the precariousness of her situation. "They're deciding whether to kill me, aren't they?" she asked quietly, watching as Nahimana sorted through various dried plants and powders. The old woman looked up, her dark eyes inscrutable in the dim light. "They decide many things," she replied in halting English. "Your fate, Takoda's judgment, the safety of our people." Sarah's hand moved protectively to her belly, where she felt the reassuring flutter of her child's movement. "And my baby. What will happen to my baby if they decide against me?" Nahimana's expression softened slightly. "Among the Apache, children are sacred gifts from the Creator. No harm would come to your little one." She hesitated, then added, "But it would be raised as one of us, never knowing its mother's ways." Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes at the thought of her child growing up without her, never knowing her love, her face, her voice. "Please," she whispered, "I don't want to die. I just want a chance to raise my baby somewhere safe." "Safe?" Nahimana echoed, a hint of bitterness creeping into her tone. There is no safety in this world, not for your people or mine. Only moments of peace between storms. I have no people, Sarah admitted, a single tear tracing its way down her cheek. My mother died when I was young. My stepfather cast me out when he learned of a condition, the baby's father. She trailed off, unconsciously touching the faded bruise at her temple. He made it clear he wanted no part of us. The medicine woman studied her thoughtfully, noting the way Sarah's hand lingered over the healing bruise. Men who strike women are the same in all tribes, she observed, weak spirits hiding behind strong fists. Sarah looked up in surprise, not having expected such understanding from the old woman. Yes, she agreed softly. That's why I couldn't marry him, even when my stepfather demanded it. I couldn't subject my child to such a father. Nahimana nodded slowly. So you chose the desert over chains. There is courage in that choice, pale one. Back at the council fire, a decision had been reached. Chief Mahka stood, his imposing figure silhouetted against the flames as he delivered the council's judgment. "But the white woman may remain until she has regained her strength," he announced, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "Nahimana will tend to her needs. But when the moon is full again, 7 days from now, she must be given to the spirits." Takoda stared at his father in disbelief. "Given to the spirits? You mean sacrifice?" "Father, no. The council has spoken." Chief Mahka cut him off firmly. "The signs are clear. A great sickness approaches our people. The white woman's blood must be offered to appease the spirits and turn aside their wrath." "This is madness," Takoda protested, looking around at the impassive faces of the council members. "We are Apache, not murderers of helpless women." "Enough!" Mahka's voice cracked like a whip. "You brought this woman into our midst, Takoda. In doing so, you accepted responsibility for the consequences. The decision has been made, and if I refuse to accept this decision," Takoda challenged, his voice low and dangerous. A heavy silence fell over the council. For a son to openly defy his father, especially when that father was chief, was unprecedented. Hototo's hand moved to his knife, his eyes narrowing at what he perceived as treasonous disrespect. "Then you choose exile," Chief Mahka replied at last, his voice betraying no emotion, though his eyes reflected deep pain. "You would no longer be Apache, no longer my son, no longer heir to leadership of our people." The weight of those words settled over the assembly like a shroud. Takoda stood frozen, caught between his sense of justice and his loyalty to his tribe, his father, his heritage. The choice before him was impossible, the life of a stranger or his place among his people. As the council fire crackled in the silence, the die was cast. 7 days until the full moon. 7 days to determine not only Sarah's fate, but his own. Dawn broke over the Apache camp, painting the red rock formations in hues of gold and amber. Sarah stood at the entrance of Nahimana's teepee, watching as the tribe began their daily routines. Women gathered around cooking fires, children chased each other between dwellings, and warriors prepared for hunting expeditions. It seemed so ordinary, so human, nothing like the savage rituals she had been taught to expect. "You should not be standing," Nahimana chided, emerging from the teepee behind her. "Your strength returns, but slowly." "I can't just lie there all day," Sarah replied, unconsciously rubbing her swollen belly. Besides, the baby gets restless when I'm still too long." Nahimana's weathered face softened slightly. "The child is strong, like its mother." She handed Sarah a small wooden cup filled with a steaming liquid. "Drink, it will give you both strength." Sarah accepted the cup with a grateful nod, having learned to trust the medicine woman's remedies over the past day. The bitter herbal concoctions had indeed reduced her fever and restored some of her vitality. As she sipped the warm tea, she noticed Takoda approaching from across the camp, his expression troubled. Several warriors watched his progress with undisguised suspicion, and Sarah had already observed how the tribe had become divided over her presence. Some, particularly the younger members and the mothers, regarded her with cautious curiosity rather than outright hostility. Others, led by the intimidating Hototo, made no attempt to hide their disdain. "How does she fare today?" Takoda asked Nahimana, though his eyes remained fixed on Sarah. "Better," the old woman replied. "The fever has broken. Her spirit is strong." Takoda nodded, seemingly relieved. "Good. I thought perhaps if she is well enough, I might show her our ways, help her understand our people." Nahimana raised an eyebrow. 6 days remain, Takoda. Do not grow attached to what cannot stay." Sarah looked between them, sensing an undercurrent she didn't fully comprehend. 6 days until what?" she asked, a chill running down her spine despite the morning warmth. Takoda and Nahimana exchanged a glance, and it was the medicine woman who spoke. "Until we decide what comes next," she said, her tone betraying nothing. "Now go with Takoda if you wish. The walking will strengthen your legs, if not too far." As they walked slowly through the camp, Sarah was acutely aware of the stares that followed them, some curious, others hostile. Children peeked from behind their mothers' skirts, pointing and whispering at her fair hair and skin. One small boy, braver than the rest, darted forward to touch her dress before scampering away, giggling. "They have never seen a white woman up close," Takoda explained, "only from a distance or in tales told around the fire." "What tales?" Sarah asked, genuinely curious. Takoda hesitated. "Not all are kind. The elders speak of white settlers who take our land, of soldiers who break treaties, of diseases that empty our villages." "And what do you believe?" she asked softly. "I believe that people are people, regardless of the color of their skin," he replied after a moment. "Some good, some not, like in any tribe." They paused at the edge of a small creek that ran through the valley, where several women were washing clothes and gathering water. They fell silent as Sarah approached, their expressions guarded. "This is Kimmy," Takoda said, gesturing to a young woman about Sarah's age who cradled an infant against her chest. "She lost her husband to white soldiers last winter, and yet she was among those who argued for your care at the council." Kimmy looked up, her dark eyes meeting Sarah's. Slowly, deliberately, she shifted her baby so that Sarah could see its face, a perfect sleeping cherub with copper skin and black hair. "Children are sacred," Kimmy said in halting English, then placed her hand briefly on Sarah's belly in a gesture of solidarity that transcended their differences. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes at the unexpected kindness. "Thank you," she whispered. As they continued their walk, Sarah found herself looking at Takoda with new eyes. The sun glinted off his black hair, tied back with a leather cord, and highlighted the strong lines of his face. Unlike Hototo and some of the other warriors, whose expressions seemed permanently hardened by suspicion and anger, Takoda's features retained a certain gentleness, a capacity for compassion that she found increasingly compelling. "Why did you save me?" she asked suddenly, stopping beside a flowering cactus. "You risked much, bringing me here." Takoda's gaze met hers, steady and unflinching. "Because life is sacred, because you fought so hard to survive, because—" He paused, seeming to search for words. "Because when I found you, something told me our paths were meant to cross." Sarah felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with her pregnancy. For a moment, they stood in silence, the weight of unspoken feelings hanging between them like the desert heat. The moment was shattered by Hototo's voice, sharp as a blade. "Takoda, the hunting party awaits you." They turned to see the warrior standing a few yards away, his face darkened with barely concealed contempt as he looked from Takoda to Sarah. "Remember the council's decision," Hototo warned, his hand resting meaningfully on the knife at his belt. 6 days until the full moon, 6 days until the spirits claim what is theirs. As he stalked away, Sarah felt ice replace the warmth that had been building inside her. "What did he mean?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "What happens at the full moon?" Takoda's expression grew troubled, conflict evident in his dark eyes. "There is much you do not understand about our ways," he said evasively. "Then help me understand," Sarah insisted, placing her hand on his arm. "Please, Takoda, I need to know what fate awaits me, awaits my child." He looked down at her pale hand against his copper skin, and something in his resolve seemed to crumble. "Come," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Tonight, after the evening meal, I will tell you everything. But not here, not where others might hear." As they walked back toward Nahimana's tipi, Sarah felt a sense of foreboding settle over her. 6 days until the full moon, 6 days to discover what the Apache planned for her, and whether Takoda would stand with her or against her when that moment came. Night had fallen over the Apache camp, wrapping the valley in a velvet blanket of darkness, pierced only by the silver light of stars and the orange glow of dying cooking fires. Most of the tribe had retired to their teepee, though the occasional murmur of conversation or a child's sleepy protest drifted through the still air. Sarah sat alone outside Nahimana's dwelling, her eyes fixed on the crescent moon that hung like a sliver of bone against the night sky. In 5 days, it would be full. 5 days until whatever fate the Apache Council had decreed would come to pass. The weight of that unknown future pressed down upon her shoulders, making it difficult to breathe despite the open expanse of sky above her. "You should be resting," came Nahimana's voice from behind her. "I can't sleep," Sarah replied without turning. "Too many thoughts. Too many fears." The old woman lowered herself to the ground beside Sarah with surprising agility, her bones creaking softly as she settled. For a while, they sat in companionable silence, watching the stars wheel slowly overhead. "In my younger days," Nahimana said at last, "I was to marry a warrior named Apache. He was strong, respected, the son of a great leader like Takoda." She traced a pattern in the dust with one gnarled finger. "The day before our union ceremony, blue-coat soldiers came. They killed many, including Apache. I survived only because I was gathering herbs in the hills." Sarah turned to look at the medicine woman, surprised by this unprompted sharing of personal history. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "It was many winters ago," Nahimana replied with a small shrug, though her eyes reflected old pain. "I tell you this so you understand. Every person in this camp has lost someone to your people. Their anger, their fear, it has deep roots." "But I've never hurt anyone," Sarah protested. "I'm not responsible for what other white people have done." "No," Nahimana agreed. "Just as I am not responsible for the actions of all Apache, but when people are afraid, they do not see individuals. They see only the face of the enemy." She fixed Sarah with a penetrating stare. "Takoda sees differently. He sees you, Sarah Mitchell, not just a white woman. That is his gift, and perhaps his curse." Before Sarah could respond, a shadow fell across them. Takoda stood there, his expression solemn as he gazed down at the two women. "It is time," he said quietly. Nahimana nodded, rising to her feet with the aid of her walking stick. "Go," she told Sarah. "Listen with an open heart to what he must tell you." Sarah followed Takoda away from the camp, moving carefully across the uneven ground in the darkness. He led her to a small outcropping of rock that overlooked the valley, where the Apache fires glowed like earthbound stars against the black canvas of night. The air was cooler here, carrying the scent of sage and juniper. "And this is one of our sacred places," Takoda explained, as they sat side by side on a flat boulder. "A place to commune with the spirits, to seek guidance in times of trouble." "And are you troubled, Takoda?" Sarah asked softly. He turned to look at her, his dark eyes reflecting the starlight. "Yes," he admitted, "more than I have ever been." Sarah waited, her heart pounding against her ribs. Whatever he had brought her here to say, she sensed it would change everything between them. "The council has made their decision," Takoda finally said, his voice low but clear in the night air. "When the moon is full, you are to be—" He hesitated, seemingly struggling with the words. "You are to be offered to the spirits. A sacrifice to prevent a great sickness that Elder Kitchi has foreseen in his dreams." The words hung in the air between them, stark and terrible. Sarah felt as though all the breath had been sucked from her lungs. "Sacrifice," she whispered, her hand instinctively moving to protect her unborn child. "They're going to kill me." "Yes," Takoda confirmed, the single word seeming to cause him physical pain. "The elders believe your blood will appease the spirits and turn aside their wrath. It is an ancient ritual, rarely practiced now, but in times of great danger." "And you agreed to this?" Sarah demanded, anger temporarily overriding her fear as she scrambled to her feet. "You saved me from death in the desert, only to deliver me to slaughter here." "No!" Takoda stood as well, reaching for her hands, which she snatched away. "I fought against this decision. I told them it was wrong, unworthy of our people, but I was overruled." "So what happens now?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling with emotion. "You just hand me over to them. Watch as they cut my throat. Take my baby and raise it as one of your own." "Your child would be spared," Takoda said quietly. "Among our people, children are sacred." "Yes, I've heard." Sarah cut him off bitterly. "How convenient that your reverence for life doesn't extend to their mothers." Takoda flinched as if she had struck him. "Sarah, please, you must understand the position I'm in. My father is chief. I'm expected to one day lead our people. If I defy the council openly, I risk not only my own future, but the future of the entire tribe." "So I should die quietly to protect your inheritance?" Sarah retorted, though her anger was already beginning to give way to despair. She sank back down onto the rock, suddenly too exhausted to stand. "I thought you were different, Takoda. I thought you saw me as a person, not just an enemy to be feared or a tool to be used." "I do see you," he insisted, kneeling before her. "Sarah, look at me." When she reluctantly raised her eyes to his, he continued, his voice intense with emotion. "From the moment I found you in the desert, something changed within me. I cannot explain it, but there is a connection between us that goes beyond words, beyond the differences of our peoples." "Then help me," she pleaded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Help me escape this place before the full moon." Pain flashed across Takoda's features. "If I help you escape, I will be exiled from my tribe. I will no longer be Apache, no longer my father's son. Everything I have known, everyone I have loved, all would be lost to me forever. And if you don't help me, I die." Sarah said simply, along with any chance for... She trailed off, unable to voice the feelings that had been growing between them. Takoda reached up to gently brush a tear from her cheek, his fingers lingering against her skin. "There may be another way," he said softly. "A way that does not require either of us to lose everything." "What way?" Sarah asked, hope flickering faintly within her. "I do not know yet," he admitted, "but I will find it. I swear to you by the spirits of my ancestors, I will not let you die on that altar." The conviction in his voice, the determination in his eyes, they sparked something within Sarah that she had thought long extinguished. Trust. Despite everything, despite the death sentence hanging over her head, she found herself believing him. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you risk so much for me?" Instead of answering with words, Takoda leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers in a kiss that was both gentle and fierce, tentative and certain. Sarah froze for an instant, surprised by the unexpected gesture, then melted into his embrace, her arms winding around his neck as she returned the kiss with equal fervor. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Takoda rested his forehead against hers. "That is why," he murmured. For a moment, they remained thus, suspended in a fragile bubble of connection that seemed to exist outside of time, beyond the boundaries of their separate worlds. Then, reluctantly, Takoda drew back. "We should return before we are missed," he said, though his eyes conveyed his reluctance to end this moment between them. "Hototo watches me closely now. If he suspects I plan to defy the Council's will..." "I understand," Sarah said, though the thought of returning to the camp, to the people who planned her death, filled her with dread. "What do we do now?" "For now, we wait and watch," Takoda replied, helping her to her feet. "I must speak with those who might be sympathetic to our cause. Nahimana, Kimi, perhaps others. We will need allies if we are to change what has been set in motion." As they made their way back down to the valley floor, the camp silent under the star-strewn sky, Sarah felt a curious mixture of terror and hope churning within her. The council had decreed her death, yet Takoda had promised her life. In 5 days, the full moon would rise over Monument Valley, and with it would come either her end or her salvation. The rising sun painted the eastern sky in streaks of pink and gold as Takoda knelt beside the sacred spring, his hands cupped beneath the clear, bubbling water. He closed his eyes, feeling the cool liquid flow between his fingers as he offered a silent prayer to the spirits of his ancestors. 4 days remained until the full moon. 4 days to prevent a sacrifice that would stain his tribe's honor and break his heart. "You seek guidance, my son." Takoda opened his eyes to find his father standing a few paces away, his weathered face solemn in the early morning light. Chief Maka no longer wore his ceremonial regalia, but simple buckskin clothing similar to Takoda's own. Yet even without the trappings of leadership, his presence commanded respect. "Yes, father," Takoda admitted, rising to his feet. "My spirit is troubled." "Because of the white woman?" "It wasn't a question. Because of what we plan to do to her," Takoda corrected gently. "Only we Apache have always prided ourselves on our honor, our courage in battle. Where is the honor in sacrificing a helpless woman who has done us no harm?" Chief Maka sighed, his gaze drifting to the distant mountains that glowed rose gold in the dawn light. "There are many kinds of courage, Takoda. Sometimes the greatest courage lies in making difficult decisions for the good of the tribe." "And is this truly for the good of the tribe? Or is it fear driving us to actions we would normally condemn?" The chief's eyes sharpened. You question the wisdom of the council. I question whether we have considered all paths, Takoda replied carefully. The spirits speak to us in many ways, Father. Perhaps saving the white woman was itself a sign, a test of our compassion, not our willingness to spill innocent blood. For a long moment, Chief Maka studied his son's face. You care for her, he said at last, his voice softening slightly, beyond mere compassion for a stranger. Takoda hesitated, then nodded once. There was no point in denial. His father had always been able to read him too well. Be careful, my son, Maka warned, placing a hand on Takoda's shoulder. Such feelings can cloud judgment. The path you are considering is dangerous. For you, for her, for all our people. How do you know what path I am considering? Takoda asked, surprised. A small, sad smile touched the chief's lips. Because I know you, Takoda. Because once, long ago, I stood where you stand now, caught between duty and the promptings of my heart. His hand fell away from Takoda's shoulder. Now, whatever you decide, remember this. A leader's first responsibility is to his people, always. With that enigmatic statement, Chief Maka turned and walked back toward the camp, leaving Takoda alone with his thoughts and the soft murmur of the sacred spring. Sarah sat cross-legged outside Nahimana's teepee, surrounded by a circle of curious children. Over the past few days, her initial terror had given way to a strange calm, perhaps born of necessity, perhaps from the quiet strength she drew from Takoda's promise. Whatever the reason, she had decided that if these were to be her final days, she would not spend them cowering in fear. Your hair is like corn silk, one little girl said in halting English, reaching out tentatively to touch a strand of Sarah's golden hair. So strange, Sarah smiled, remembering how her own mother had once compared her hair to summer sunshine. Would you like me to show you how women of my people wear their hair for special occasions? She asked. The girl nodded eagerly, and soon Sarah found herself demonstrating a simple braid, her fingers moving deftly despite her weakened state. Other children gathered around, watching with wide-eyed fascination. Even a few of the younger women paused in their morning chores to observe. Now you try, Sarah encouraged, guiding the little girl's hands as she attempted to replicate the braiding technique. From across the camp, Hototo watched the scene with narrowed eyes, his mouth set in a hard line. Beside him stood Kichi, the elder who had dreamed of the pale snake. See how she corrupts our young ones, Hototo muttered. In teaching them the ways of the white world, drawing them to her like moths to flame. She will be gone soon enough, Kichi replied, his voice a dry whisper. The spirits will have their due. Unless Takoda interferes, Hototo countered. Have you seen how he looks at her, how he defends her to any who will listen? I fear he plans to betray the council's judgment. Kichi's rheumy eyes followed Takoda as he returned from the sacred spring, noting how the young warrior's gaze immediately sought out Sarah among the children. Then we must be vigilant, the elder said. The safety of our tribe depends on it. As the day progressed, Takoda moved carefully through the camp, speaking quietly with those he thought might be sympathetic to his cause. Kimi, the young widow with the infant, listened intently as he explained his concerns about the planned sacrifice. I, too, have wondered if this is the right path, she admitted, bouncing her baby gently in her arms. The white woman has shown kindness to my son, teaching him games from her world. There is gentleness in her that does not match the stories of white cruelty. Will you stand with me if the time comes? Takoda asked. Kimi hesitated, her eyes darting to where Hototo conversed with several warriors. I cannot promise, she said softly. I have my son to consider, but neither will I stand against you." It was not the firm alliance Takoda had hoped for, but it was something. Throughout the day, he had similar conversations with others, some openly supportive, others cautiously neutral, a few hostile to the very suggestion of defying the council's will. By sunset, Takoda had managed to secure the tentative support of 6 warriors, including his cousin Ahote, and several women, including Kimi and the young mother whose son Sarah had been teaching to braid. It was not enough to challenge the council directly, but it might be enough to create a diversion if escape became necessary. As twilight deepened into night, Sarah found herself once again sitting with Nahimana beside a small fire outside the medicine woman's teepee. The old woman was showing her how to grind certain herbs into a poultice for wounds, explaining each step in her mixture of halting English and expressive gestures. "You have healer's hands," Nahimana observed as Sarah carefully measured out the dried plants. "Gentle but sure. My mother was a midwife," Sarah explained, surprised by the unexpected compliment. "She taught me some of her skills before she died." "Ah," Nahimana nodded. "That is why you understand the body's ways, why you respect the plant's power." A comfortable silence fell between them as they worked, broken only by the occasional instruction or question. Sarah found an unexpected peace in the rhythmic task, in the sharp, clean scent of the herbs, in the quiet companionship of the old woman who had initially seemed so forbidding. "Nahimana," Sarah said at last, her hands stilling over the mortar and pestle. "If I die in 3 days, what will happen to my baby?" The medicine woman's wrinkled face grew solemn. "The child would be given to a woman who has milk, but no baby of her own. It would be raised Apache, taught our ways, our stories. And if I live," Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper, "if somehow I survive, what then?" Nahimana regarded her thoughtfully. "That depends on many things, on choices not yet made, paths not yet taken." She leaned forward, her dark eyes reflecting the firelight. "But know this, Pale One. Whatever happens, your child has already been touched by 2 worlds. That cannot be undone, whether you live or die." Before Sarah could respond, a commotion erupted from the far side of the camp, raised voices, the sound of running feet. Takoda appeared suddenly from the gathering darkness, his expression urgent. "You must come quickly," he said to Sarah, extending his hand to help her up. "Both of you." "What has happened?" Nahimana demanded, rising with the aid of her staff. "Blue-coat soldiers," Takoda replied grimly. "A patrol, camped less than half a day's ride from here. Ahote spotted them while hunting. If they are searching for her—" He glanced at Sarah, worry evident in his eyes. "I told you, no one is looking for me," Sarah insisted. "My family cast me out. They don't care whether I live or die." "Perhaps," Takoda acknowledged. "But if by chance they are searching, or if they simply stumble upon our camp—" He didn't need to finish the thought. They all knew what would happen if U.S. cavalry soldiers discovered an Apache encampment, regardless of whether they were searching for a missing white woman. "We must move the camp," came Chief Maka's voice as he strode toward them, his face set in grim lines. "Tonight, under cover of darkness." "We cannot risk discovery." "Move? Where?" Takoda asked. "To the high caves in the western cliffs," the chief replied. "It will be difficult for the women and children, but we have no choice." As the camp erupted into organized chaos, women hurriedly packing essential belongings, men dismantling teepees, children being quieted and gathered, Sarah felt a renewed sense of dread wash over her. The move would make any escape attempt far more difficult, perhaps impossible, and the high caves would provide the perfect setting for a ritual sacrifice, far from prying eyes. Takoda seemed to read her thoughts. "This changes nothing," he murmured, his hand finding hers in the growing darkness. "I will still find a way to save you." Sarah nodded, trying to draw strength from his certainty, even as doubt gnawed at her heart. 3 days until the full moon. 3 days to escape a fate that seemed increasingly inescapable. The journey to the high caves was arduous, especially for Sarah in her condition. The narrow path wound treacherously up the face of the western cliffs, barely visible in the dim starlight. Takoda stayed close to her side, one hand supporting her elbow, the other ready to catch her if she stumbled on the loose stones that frequently shifted beneath their feet. "Careful," he murmured as she paused to catch her breath, her hand instinctively cradling her swollen belly. "We are nearly there." Above them, the silhouettes of Apache warriors stood guard on rocky outcroppings, their keen eyes scanning the valley below for any sign of the blue-coat soldiers. The women and children had been sent ahead with most of the tribe's belongings, while the men formed a protective rear guard, ready to defend if necessary. Sarah glanced back down the path they had climbed, now little more than a shadow against the darker backdrop of the cliff face. Far below, the valley floor stretched out, silvered by starlight. If the soldiers came, they would be visible for miles, but so would anyone attempting to flee the caves. "It's a perfect trap," she whispered, the realization striking her with chilling clarity. "Up here, there's only one way in. And one way out." Takoda's expression remained carefully neutral, but she felt his hand tighten slightly on her arm. "Yes," he agreed quietly, "that is why these caves have protected our people for generations. They are easily defended." "And impossible to escape from," Sarah added, meeting his eyes meaningfully. Before he could respond, Hototo's voice cut through the night air. "Takoda. Chief Maka requires your counsel." The warrior stood a dozen paces ahead, his silhouette dark against the mouth of the largest cave. His tone was respectful enough, given Takoda's position as the chief's son, but his body language, stiff, hand never far from his knife, betrayed his suspicion. "Go ahead with Nahimana," Takoda told Sarah, gesturing to where the medicine woman waited a short distance away. "I will join you later." As Sarah made her way carefully toward Nahimana, she felt Hototo's eyes following her, cold and calculating. She knew without being told that he would be watching her, watching them both, with unrelenting vigilance in the days to come. The cave system was more extensive than Sarah had initially realized. A series of interconnected chambers stretched back into the cliff face, some small and intimate, others vast enough to house several family groups. The largest cavern, near the entrance, served as a central gathering space, its high ceiling disappearing into shadows above the communal fire that now burned at its center. Nahimana had been assigned a smaller chamber off one of the side passages, its walls smooth from centuries of wind erosion. Here, she had established her healing space, arranging her pouches of herbs and medicinal tools on a natural stone shelf. 2 sleeping pallets had been prepared on the sandy floor, one for the medicine woman, one for Sarah. "Rest now," Nahimana instructed, helping Sarah settle onto the pallet. "Oh, the climb was difficult for you and the little one." Sarah nodded gratefully, sinking onto the surprisingly comfortable bed of pine boughs covered with soft deerskin. Her legs ached from the steep ascent, and her back throbbed with a dull, persistent pain. As she stretched out, trying to find a position that eased the discomfort, her gaze fell upon a series of paintings that covered one wall of the chamber. Handprints in red ochre, stylized figures of men and animals, spiral patterns that seemed to swirl and dance in the flickering light of Nahimana's small fire. "Those are very old," the medicine woman explained, following Sarah's gaze. Made by the ancient ones, those who came before even the Apache. They're beautiful, Sarah murmured, reaching out to touch one of the handprints, her pale fingers overlapping with the ochre outline of someone who had stood in this same spot countless generations ago. What do they mean? Nahimana settled beside her, her old bones creaking slightly. They tell stories of hunts, of ceremonies, of visions seen in dreams. She pointed to a series of concentric circles above a stick figure with a bow. This one tells of a great warrior who followed a star to find water during a time of drought. He saved his people from dying of thirst. Sarah studied the ancient paintings with renewed interest, seeing now how they formed a narrative. Simple yet profound, a record of lives lived and challenges overcome. Your people have a rich history, she said softly. All peoples do, Nahimana replied, her weathered face thoughtful in the firelight. The difference is in how we tell our stories, how we remember our dead, how we honor the land that sustains us. She fixed Sarah with a penetrating stare. Your people write their stories in books. They build great stone houses and iron roads. They change the land to suit themselves, rather than living in harmony with it. Not all white people are the same, Sarah said, echoing Takoda's words from days earlier. Just as not all Apache are the same. A smile flickered across Nahimana's face. Perhaps you are wiser than I first thought, Pale One. The sound of approaching footsteps interrupted their conversation. Takoda appeared at the entrance to the chamber, his expression troubled. Behind him loomed the imposing figure of Chief Mahka. Father wishes to speak with you, Takoda said to Sarah, his tone carefully neutral. Sarah struggled to sit up, acutely aware of her disheveled appearance and the chief's piercing gaze. Chief Mahka entered the small chamber, his presence seeming to fill the space despite his measured movements. Unlike Hototo, whose hostility was overt and aggressive, the chief's demeanor was calm, almost sorrowful, as he regarded the pregnant white woman who had unwittingly become the center of his tribe's spiritual crisis. I am told you carry a child, he said in fluent, if accented English, a gift from the Creator. Yes, Sarah replied, one hand protectively covering her belly. A daughter, I believe, though I cannot be certain. The chief nodded slowly. Among our people, children are treasured above all else. They are our future, our hope, our continuation. He paused, studying her face. You understand that we would never harm an innocent child, regardless of its parentage. So I've been told, Sarah answered, unable to keep a trace of bitterness from her voice. Though, apparently the same protection does not extend to mothers. Chief Mahka's expression remained impassive, but something flickered in his dark eyes. Respect, perhaps, for her boldness. The council has decreed that your blood must be offered to turn aside the sickness that threatens our people. This is not a decision made in hatred or vengeance, but in the sincere belief that it is necessary for our survival. And do you believe that, Chief Mahka? Sarah challenged, meeting his gaze directly. Do you truly believe that murdering an innocent woman will please your spirits or prevent disease? The chief was silent for a long moment, his face unreadable in the dim light. What I believe, he said at last, is that a leader must sometimes set aside personal feelings for the good of his people. The council has spoken. The ritual will take place when the moon is full, 2 nights from now. With that, he turned to leave, pausing only to place a hand briefly on Takoda's shoulder, a gesture that might have been encouragement, warning, or simply acknowledgement of the difficult position his son now occupied. When the chief had gone, Takoda sank down beside Sarah, his shoulders slumped with the weight of internal conflict. The council remains firm, he said quietly. Even here, away from our usual grounds, they insist the ritual must take place. "And what of our plan?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper, conscious of potential listeners beyond the chamber walls. Takoda glanced toward the entrance, then leaned closer, his lips nearly brushing her ear. "It grows more difficult," he admitted. "The path down from these caves is watched day and night. Hototo has assigned his most loyal warriors to guard duty, and they have been instructed to pay special attention to my movements." "They suspect you," Sarah realized aloud. "Yes, Hototo has convinced several elders that I may try to prevent the sacrifice." A muscle worked in Takoda's jaw. He is not wrong. Nahimana, who had been silently arranging her medicinal supplies, now approached them. "There is another way," she said softly. "It a path known only to the medicine people, a narrow passage that leads from the rear chamber to a ledge halfway down the cliff. It is dangerous, used only in the most dire emergencies, when the front entrance is blocked or under attack." Hope flared in Sarah's chest, but Takoda's expression remained troubled. "Such a climb would be perilous even for a warrior in peak condition," he said, looking pointedly at Sarah's pregnant belly. "For a woman in her state, I can do it," Sarah insisted, clutching his arm. "I've always been strong, and these past months have only made me more determined. I would rather risk a fall than face certain death on your altar." Takoda covered her hand with his own, his touch warm and reassuring despite the gravity of their situation. "We will consider all options," he promised, "but we must move carefully. If Hototo or the elders suspect our plan—" The unfinished thought hung in the air between them, its implications clear. Failure would mean exile for Takoda and death for Sarah. "You should rest now," Nahimana told them both, shooing Takoda toward the entrance. "Tomorrow will bring its own challenges." Reluctantly, Takoda rose to leave, his eyes lingering on Sarah's face as if committing every feature to memory. "A dream of green valleys and clear streams," he said softly, "an Apache blessing for peaceful sleep." "And you," Sarah replied, forcing a smile she did not feel. When he had gone, she lay back on her pallet, staring up at the shadowed ceiling of the cave. The baby shifted restlessly within her, as if sensing her mother's distress. "Hush, little one," Sarah whispered, rubbing gentle circles over her swollen belly. "We're not finished yet." Not by a long sight. Outside, beyond the mouth of the cave, the moon hung in the sky, no longer a sliver, but a growing crescent that would reach fullness in just 2 days. Time, 2 days to plan, 2 days to find courage, 2 days to live. The next morning dawned clear and bright, sunlight streaming into the cave entrance and reflecting off the pale stone walls. Sarah emerged from Nahimana's chamber to find the tribe already engaged in their daily routines, adapted now to their temporary mountain home. Women tended small cook fires near the cave mouth where the smoke could escape. Children played quieter games than usual, their normally exuberant shouts muted in the enclosed space. Warriors came and went, bringing water from a small spring that trickled from a crevice in one of the deeper chambers. Takoda was nowhere to be seen, but Hototo stood near the main entrance, deep in conversation with Elder Kichi. Both men fell silent as Sarah approached, their eyes following her with undisguised suspicion. "The white woman ventures out of her safe nest," Hototo observed in Apache, his tone making it clear he did not expect her to understand. "I to stretch my legs and feel the sun," Sarah replied in the same language, her pronunciation careful but recognizable. Hototo's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed dangerously. "You speak our tongue," he said, switching to heavily accented English. "Who taught you?" "I listen, I learn," Sarah answered simply, as any guest should. You are not a guest, Hototo corrected harshly. You are a sacrifice. Food for the spirits. Elder Kichi laid a restraining hand on the warrior's arm. Enough, Hototo. The woman will meet her destiny when the moon is full. Until then, there is no honor in cruelty. Hototo shrugged off the elder's touch, but stepped back, his hand falling away from the knife he had unconsciously reached for. As you say, elder, but she should be watched. And Takoda also. Where is Takoda? Sarah asked, unable to mask her concern. I haven't seen him this morning. The chief's son has duties, Elder Kichi replied, his roomy eyes studying her face with uncomfortable intensity. Duties to his people that come before other interests. The implied criticism was clear, but Sarah refused to be cowed. Of course, she said with as much dignity as she could muster. If you'll excuse me, I promised to help Nahimana gather herbs for her medicines. As she turned to go, Hototo's voice stopped her. Do not think to escape, white woman. These cliffs have claimed many lives, those foolish enough to attempt the descent without guidance. His smile was cold, predatory. Besides, where would you go? The desert would take you within a day, and if not the desert, then the soldiers or the settlers. Out there you are alone. Here, at least, your child will be cared for after you are gone. The words struck Sarah like physical blows, each one highlighting the impossibility of her situation. Without Takoda's help, without knowledge of the land or resources to survive, what chance did she have? Perhaps Hototo was right. Perhaps the best she could hope for was that her child would live on, even if she did not. No. She squared her shoulders, refusing to surrender to despair. Takoda had promised to find a way, and until proven otherwise, she would trust in that promise. With a nod to Elder Kichi and a level gaze at Hototo, she made her way back toward Nahimana's chamber, conscious of their eyes boring into her back with every step. The game had become more dangerous, the pieces arranged against her and Takoda with cunning precision. 2 days. The thought beat in her mind with the rhythm of her heart. 2 days to live, 2 days to escape, 2 days until the moon reached fullness and her blood was spilled upon the stone. Takoda did not return until well after midday, when the sun had climbed high enough to send shafts of golden light deep into the main cavern. He entered quietly, accompanied by his cousin Ahote, both men dusty from travel and carrying several rabbits for the cooking pots. Sarah, who had been helping Kimi teach some of the younger children a finger game, felt relief wash over her at the sight of him. A feeling quickly tempered by concern as she noted the tight set of his jaw, the careful way he avoided looking in her direction. Hototo intercepted them before they had taken more than a few steps into the cave, his voice carrying across the chamber, though he spoke in rapid Apache that Sarah could only partially understand. Something about checking on soldiers and unnecessary risk. Takoda's response was measured, respectful, but with an undercurrent of steel that made it clear he would not be intimidated. He gestured toward the game they had brought, saying something about providing for the tribe's needs. Hototo seemed unsatisfied with the explanation, but stepped aside, allowing Takoda and Ahote to pass. It was not until late afternoon, when most of the tribe was occupied with food preparation and other chores, that Takoda finally approached Nahimana's chamber. Sarah had been attempting to nap, the baby's restless movements and her own anxiety making true rest impossible. She sat up quickly as he entered, her heart leaping at the sight of him despite the gravity of their situation. "I began to think you weren't coming back," she said softly. "And I will always come back for you," Takoda replied, his voice equally low as he knelt beside her pallet. He glanced toward the chamber entrance, where Nahimana sat grinding herbs, effectively blocking anyone from entering unannounced. Ahote and I went to scout the soldiers' camp. They have moved on toward Fort Defiance, but there are other threats to consider. What threats? Sarah asked, a fresh wave of fear washing over her. Renegade warriors from another Apache band have been spotted in the eastern foothills. They are led by a man called Delgadito, who has no love for my father's peaceful policies. Takoda's expression was grim. If they discover our location, they would not hesitate to attack, and a white woman would be a prize beyond measure to them. Sarah swallowed hard. So I'm in danger, no matter what happens. From your tribe if I stay, from soldiers or renegades if I flee, from some in my tribe, Takoda corrected gently. Not all wish you harm. Nahimana has been speaking with the women, especially those with children. Many begin to question whether the spirits truly demand such a sacrifice. But not enough to stop it, Sarah guessed. No, Takoda admitted. The elders stand firm, and they have Hototo and his warriors to enforce their will. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. But I have found the passage Nahimana spoke of. It is narrow and treacherous, but passable. With care and the Creator's blessing, we could descend to the valley floor undetected. When? Sarah asked, hope and fear mingling in her chest. Tomorrow night. The ritual is set to begin at moonrise. While the tribe gathers in the main cavern for the preliminary prayers, we will slip away through the back chambers. His hand found hers, fingers intertwining. I have cached supplies, water, food, blankets at the base of the cliff. Ahote will have horses waiting for us a mile to the west. Ahote is helping us. Sarah was surprised. She had barely spoken to Takoda's cousin. He owes me a life debt, Takoda explained. 3 winters ago, I pulled him from a frozen river when others thought him lost. He will not betray us, even to the council. Sarah squeezed his hand, drawing strength from his touch, his certainty. And then what? Where will we go? A shadow crossed Takoda's face. North, toward Navajo territory. My mother's sister married a Navajo headman many years ago. They may grant us sanctuary, at least for a time. He hesitated, then added, but Sarah, you must understand, if we do this, I can never return to my people. I will be exiled, my name unspoken, my place in the tribe forfeit. The weight of his sacrifice struck her anew. For her, a white woman he had known for mere days, he was willing to abandon everything. His heritage, his future as chief, his very identity as Apache. Why? She whispered, the question that had haunted her since that night on the outcropping. Why would you do this for me? Takoda studied her face in the dim light of the cave, his dark eyes reflecting a depth of emotion that made her breath catch. Because when I found you in the desert, something inside me recognized something inside you. As if our spirits had known each other in some time before this one. He touched her cheek gently. The elders speak of soul threads, invisible cords that bind certain people together across time and space. I believe such a thread connects us, Sarah Mitchell, and I would rather follow it into the unknown than sever it for the sake of tradition or fear. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes at the simple poetry of his words, the sincerity that resonated in his voice. I feel it too, she admitted. From that first moment when you gave me water, when I looked into your eyes, it was like coming home somehow. Takoda leaned forward, pressing his forehead against hers in an intimate gesture that felt more binding than any kiss. They remained thus for several heartbeats, sharing breath, sharing strength. Tomorrow night, he murmured at last, drawing back reluctantly. Be ready. Wear the moccasins Nahimana has made for you. They will give you better grip on the rocks than your own shoes." Sarah nodded, committing every detail to memory. "I'll be ready." The day of the planned sacrifice dawned blood red. The sun rising through a haze of dust swept up by night winds. Many in the tribe took it as an omen, a sign that the spirits were hungry for the offering that would come with the full moon. Preparations for the ritual began early, with certain warriors designated to construct the stone altar in the main cavern, while others were sent to gather specific woods and herbs for the sacred fire. Sarah watched from the shadows of Nahimana's chamber as people moved with purpose through the caves, their faces solemn, their voices hushed, as if already in the presence of the spirits they sought to appease. The air hummed with a tension that was almost palpable, a mixture of reverence, anticipation, and, from some, barely concealed bloodlust. "They truly believe this will save them," she murmured to Nahimana, who was carefully sorting through her medicinal supplies, selecting certain items to pack into a small pouch. "Many do," the old woman confirmed. "Fear is a powerful force, pale one. It can make the wisest elder embrace foolishness, the gentlest mother condone cruelty. And you? Do you believe my death will turn aside this sickness they fear?" Nahimana's gnarled hands stilled over her herbs. "I believe that all things are connected, like strands in a great web. Pull one strand and the entire web trembles. Perhaps your blood would indeed please certain spirits, but what other spirits might it anger? What balance might it disturb?" She shook her head slowly. "No, I do not think your death is the answer. If it were, the spirits would not have guided Takoda to find you in the first place." Sarah had not considered this perspective before, that her rescue itself might have been the spirits' intervention rather than a disruption of their will. "Then why haven't you spoken against the sacrifice? Why haven't you told the council this?" "Who says I have not?" Nahimana replied, with a small, enigmatic smile. "But an old woman's wisdom is easily dismissed when set against an elder's visions or a warrior's fears." She resumed her sorting, placing a small packet of herbs in Sarah's hand. "Keep these with you. They will help with pain and bleeding, should your child decide to come early." Sarah stared at the packet, a new fear gripping her heart. "You think I might go into labor during our escape? The journey will be difficult, the stress great," Nahimana said pragmatically. "It is best to be prepared for all possibilities." Before Sarah could respond, a shadow fell across the chamber entrance. She looked up to find Kimi standing there, her infant son strapped to her back, her expression a mixture of determination and fear. "May I enter?" the young woman asked in careful English. Nahimana nodded, gesturing for her to come inside. Kimi approached Sarah, glancing once over her shoulder to ensure they were not observed. "I bring this," she said, pressing a small object into Sarah's hand, "for protection." Sarah opened her palm to reveal a tiny pouch made of deer skin, decorated with intricate beadwork in patterns of blue and white. "What is it?" she asked. "Medicine bundle," Kimi explained. "I'm made with my son's first hair, blessed by my grandmother before she walked the spirit path. Very powerful protection for mothers and children." She touched her son's sleeping head gently. "You go tonight." "Yes, with Takoda." Sarah exchanged an alarmed glance with Nahimana. "How do you know about that?" "Ahote tell me. He prepare horses." Kimi's voice dropped to a whisper. "Many watch for you to run." Hototo put warriors at cave mouth, at all paths down cliff, very dangerous. "We know," Sarah assured her, touched by the young woman's concern. "We'll be careful." Kimi nodded solemnly. "I pray to Creator for you, for safe journey." She hesitated, then added, "When I lose husband, I think my heart die too. But then my son born, and I find new strength, new hope. You will find also with your child. And with Takoda. With that, she touched her fingers to her lips and then to Sarah's forehead in a gesture of blessing before slipping out of the chamber as quietly as she had come. Sarah looked down at the medicine bundle in her palm, overwhelmed by the unexpected gift and the sentiment behind it. She risks much, helping us, she said softly. As do many, Nahimana agreed. But not all Apache wish to see innocent blood spilled, whatever the elders may claim. As the day progressed, the atmosphere in the caves grew increasingly charged. Warriors painted their bodies with ritual symbols, streaks of red ochre across cheekbones, lightning patterns down arms, circles representing the full moon over their hearts. Women prepared special foods for the feast that would follow the sacrifice, while children were kept away from the main cavern where the altar stone now stood. Ominous and waiting, Sarah remained in Nahimana's chamber, ostensibly too unwell to participate in the day's activities. In reality, she was gathering her strength for the escape attempt to come, rehearsing Takoda's instructions in her mind, and trying to quell the fear that threatened to overwhelm her resolve. The baby moved restlessly within her, as if sensing her mother's anxiety. Sarah rubbed her belly soothingly, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. We'll be safe soon, little one. Just hold on a bit longer. Don't come today, please. Not today. Late in the afternoon, as shadows began to lengthen across the cave entrance, Chief Maka himself came to see her. He entered Nahimana's chamber with quiet dignity, his face solemn beneath the ceremonial paint that marked him as the tribe's spiritual leader. The women say you are unwell, he said, studying Sarah's face with eyes that seemed to see more than she wished to reveal. And just tired, she replied, struggling to sit up straighter on her pallet. The baby is active today. The chief nodded, his gaze dropping momentarily to her swollen belly. It is natural for children to sense when great events approach, he said. Their spirits are still close to the other world, sensitive to its currents. Sarah wasn't sure how to respond to this, so she remained silent, waiting for him to reveal the purpose of his visit. And I have come to tell you that you need not fear for your child, Chief Maka continued after a moment. The ritual requires only your blood, not the innocent one you carry. When the time comes, Nahimana will deliver the baby safely, and it will be given to a good family who will raise it with love and honor. How can you speak of love and honor while planning to murder its mother? Sarah asked, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. The chief's expression did not change, but something flickered in the depths of his eyes, regret, perhaps, or uncertainty quickly mastered. I understand your anger, he said quietly. In your place, I too would rage against what seems an unjust fate, but you must understand that leaders sometimes face impossible choices, the good of many against the life of one. The preservation of a tribe against the survival of a stranger. And if that stranger carries your grandchild, Sarah challenged, the words escaping before she could reconsider them, would you still tie her to a stone and cut out her heart? Chief Maka went very still, his eyes narrowing as he studied her face. What are you saying, white woman? Sarah swallowed hard, knowing she had ventured into dangerous territory, but unable to retreat. I'm saying that Takoda and I, that we have formed a bond, that the future of your tribe and my child are more connected than you realize. For a long moment, the chief said nothing, his weathered face unreadable in the dim light of the cave. Then, unexpectedly, a small, sad smile touched his lips. So it is as I feared, he murmured, more to himself than to her. History repeats itself, though the players change. Before Sarah could ask what he meant, a commotion erupted from the main cavern, raised voices, the sound of running feet. Chief Maka turned sharply, one hand moving to the knife at his belt as Hototo burst into the chamber, his face flushed with triumph. "Chief, we have discovered Takoda's plan," he announced, casting a venomous glance at Sarah. "Ahote has confessed everything." They meant to flee tonight, during the preliminary prayers, to escape through the secret path at the rear of the caves. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. Ahote had betrayed them. Their plan was exposed. There would be no escape now, no chance to avoid the sacrifice that loomed with the rising of the full moon. "Where is my son?" Chief Maka demanded, his voice dangerously calm. "And restrained in the inner chamber," Hototo replied with obvious satisfaction. "He does not deny his intention to defy the council and steal the sacrifice. He awaits your judgment, Chief." Chief Maka's face hardened, all trace of the earlier vulnerability vanishing behind the mask of tribal leader. "I will speak with him," he said. "Guard the white woman closely. The ritual will proceed as planned when the moon rises." As the chief strode from the chamber, Hototo fixed Sarah with a look of pure malice. "Did you truly believe you could escape your destiny?" he asked softly. "The spirits have decreed your death, Pale One. Neither you nor the chief's son can change what must be." With that, he posted 2 warriors at the entrance to Nahimana's chamber and departed, leaving Sarah alone with the terrible knowledge that their plan had failed, that Takoda was imprisoned, and that with the rising of the full moon, her life would end on the altar stone of an Apache sacrifice. Twilight crept through the cave entrance, painting the stone walls with hues of amber and purple, as the sun began its descent behind the western mesas. Within the main cavern, preparations for the ritual had reached their final stage. The altar stone stood at the center, its flat surface scrubbed clean and surrounded by carefully arranged symbols drawn in red ochre. 4 ceremonial posts had been erected around it, representing the cardinal directions, each topped with eagle feathers and adorned with strings of bone beads that clacked softly in the draught that wound through the caves. Sarah sat alone in Nahimana's chamber, the 2 warrior guards preventing anyone from entering or leaving. The medicine woman had been summoned to help with ritual preparations, leaving Sarah to face her fear in solitude. She cradled her swollen belly with trembling hands, whispering desperate prayers to a god who suddenly seemed very far away. "Please," she murmured, tears slipping down her cheeks. "If not for me, then for my baby, for Takoda." As if in answer, a sharp pain lanced through her abdomen, causing her to gasp and double over. Not now, she thought with rising panic. Not when everything had fallen apart. The baby couldn't come now in the midst of this nightmare, but another contraction followed the first, and she realized with growing dread that her child might have other plans. In a small chamber deep within the cave system, Takoda knelt on the stone floor, his wrists bound behind him with rawhide thongs. Across from him stood his father, Chief Maka, his face set in hard lines of disappointment and suppressed anger. "You would betray your people," the chief said, his voice low but sharp with accusation. "Betray your heritage, your duty, your future, all for a white woman you have known mere days." "I would prevent an innocent death," Takoda countered, meeting his father's gaze steadily despite his bound position. "There is no honor in sacrificing a helpless woman, regardless of the color of her skin or the fears of our elders. The council has decided. The council is wrong." Takoda's voice echoed off the stone walls. They act from fear, not wisdom. Since when do the Apache murder women to appease spirits? Since when do we place superstition above compassion? Chief Maka's hand shot out, striking Takoda across the face with enough force to snap his head to the side. You forget yourself, the chief growled. You forget who you are. Takoda slowly straightened, a trickle of blood running from the corner of his mouth. No, father, he said quietly. I remember exactly who I am, who you raised me to be. A man of honor, of courage, of justice. Would you have me become less to please the council? Something flickered in the chief's eyes, doubt, perhaps, or a grudging respect for his son's defiance. He turned away, pacing the small chamber with measured steps. The white woman claims there is something between you, he said at length, a bond deeper than mere compassion for a stranger. Takoda's expression softened slightly. She speaks the truth. I cannot explain it, father, but from the moment I found her in the desert, I felt a connection that transcends the differences between our peoples, as if the Creator himself guided my steps to her side. Such feelings are dangerous in times like these, Chief Maka warned. And they cloud judgment, lead to rash decisions. Or perhaps they clear the mist of fear and tradition, Takoda suggested, allowing us to see what is truly right. The chief stopped pacing, studying his son's face in the dim light of the single torch that illuminated the chamber. You truly believe this, don't you? That saving this woman is worth sacrificing everything, your place in the tribe, your future as chief, even the safety of our people if the sickness comes. I believe that our people's safety does not depend on spilling innocent blood, Takoda replied firmly. And yes, I would sacrifice everything to prevent this ritual, not just for Sarah, but for the honor of the Apache. For the future of a people who must find a way to live in this changing world without abandoning what makes us truly great, our courage, our integrity, our respect for all life. Chief Maka was silent for a long moment, his weathered face unreadable. Then, unexpectedly, he moved behind Takoda and began working at the rawhide bindings around his wrists. What are you doing? Takoda asked, confused as he felt the thongs loosen. Making a choice, his father replied cryptically, as you have made yours. As the bindings fell away, Takoda turned to face the chief, rubbing his chafed wrists. I don't understand. Chief Maka reached inside his tunic and withdrew a small object, a carved stone bear, worn smooth by years of handling. This belonged to your grandfather, he said, pressing it into Takoda's palm. He gave it to me when I faced a similar choice, many winters ago. What choice? Takoda asked, closing his fingers around the talisman. A sad smile touched the chief's lips. Your mother was not my first love, he said softly. Before her, there was another, a Navajo woman captured during a raid. I was to lead the war party that would execute her as revenge for Apache deaths. But I could not do it. He paused, lost in memory. And I helped her escape instead, nearly losing my place in the tribe. My father, your grandfather, was the only one who stood by me. Takoda stared at his father in shock. I never knew this. Some stories are kept silent until they must be told, Chief Maka replied. Now listen carefully, my son. The ritual will begin at moonrise. Hototo and the elders expect you to be brought before the tribe to witness the sacrifice, to see the consequences of your defiance. And instead, you will take the white woman and go. The chief's voice was firm, decisive. There is a passage beyond this chamber, seldom used and known to few. It leads to a series of narrow ledges that eventually reach the valley floor near the western ridge. It is dangerous, especially in darkness, but possible. Hope flared in Takoda's chest, tempered by confusion. Why, father? Why help us now? Chief Maka placed a hand on his son's shoulder, his eyes reflecting a mixture of sorrow and pride. Because I see in you the same fire that burned in me at your age. Because some traditions must give way to new understanding if our people are to survive. And because... He hesitated, then continued more softly, because I believe the Spirit sent this woman to us, not as a sacrifice, but as a test of our humanity in the face of fear. Takoda embraced his father fiercely, overwhelmed by this unexpected turn. Thank you, he whispered. I will honor your trust in me. Go quickly, the chief urged, pulling away. I will tell the council that you have agreed to accept tribal judgment after the ritual. That will give you time to reach Sarah and flee before they realize you are gone. As Takoda turned to leave through the narrow passage his father had indicated, Chief Maka called after him one last time, My son, whatever happens, know that you carry the true spirit of the Apache with you. Not in your blood alone, but in your actions, your courage, your heart. With a final nod of understanding and gratitude, Takoda disappeared into the darkness of the passage, the stone bear clutched tightly in his hand like a promise. In Nahimana's chamber, Sarah had managed to muffle her cries of pain as the contractions continued, coming at irregular intervals that suggested early labor rather than imminent birth. Still, the timing could not have been worse. To attempt an escape, if escape were even still possible, while in labor seemed like madness, yet to remain meant certain death for her, and who knew what fate for her child, raised among those who had murdered its mother. One of the guards glanced at her with a frown as she shifted position, biting her lip against another contraction. "Be still," he commanded in broken English. "And soon it will be time." Sarah nodded weakly, not trusting herself to speak. The pain receded, leaving her shaking and covered in a fine sheen of sweat. She closed her eyes, trying to focus on her breathing as Nahimana had taught her. In, out, slow and steady. A soft sound from the rear of the chamber made her eyes snap open. At first, she saw nothing unusual, just the familiar stone walls, the ancient paintings, the shadowed recesses where Nahimana stored her medicinal supplies. Then, almost imperceptibly, one of the shadows moved. Takoda emerged from a crevice she had never noticed before, his finger pressed to his lips in a signal for silence. He gestured for her to come to him, his eyes darting toward the guards who stood with their backs to the chamber, attention focused on the activities in the main cavern beyond. Sarah rose as quietly as she could, gathering her blanket around her shoulders and clutching the small medicine bundle Kimmy had given her. Another contraction hit just as she took her first step, and she froze, biting down hard on her knuckles to keep from crying out. Takoda's eyes widened in alarm as he realized what was happening. When the pain passed, Sarah forced herself to move, each step careful and silent across the sandy floor of the cave. The guards remained oblivious, engrossed in conversation about the coming ritual. Just a few more steps. She reached Takoda's side, and he pulled her into the concealed crevice, a narrow fissure in the cave wall that widened into a passage beyond. Once they were safely out of sight, he embraced her briefly but fiercely. "I thought all was lost," she whispered against his chest. "How did you escape?" "My father," Takoda replied, surprising her. "There is no time to explain now. We must hurry. The ritual begins at moonrise, and once they discover we are gone." He didn't need to finish the thought. Sarah nodded, then winced as another contraction rippled through her. "The baby," she gasped, clutching his arm. "I think it's coming." Takoda's expression flickered between alarm and determination. How close together are the pains? Still far apart. Maybe every 20 minutes. I don't think birth is imminent. But we cannot stay here, Takoda said firmly. "Can you walk?" Sarah straightened, setting her jaw with resolve. "Yes." "Lead the way." The passage was narrow and winding, clearly not a main route through the caves. In places, they had to turn sideways to squeeze through tight sections. Takoda, helping Sarah maneuver her pregnant body through the confined space. The only light came from a small torch Takoda had lit, its flame casting jumping shadows on the stone walls around them. "Where does this lead?" Sarah asked, pausing to catch her breath after a particularly difficult squeeze. "Eventually to the valley floor," Takoda explained, "but the path is dangerous, narrow ledges, steep climbs, even more treacherous in your condition." "We have no choice," Sarah reminded him, then gasped as another contraction seized her, stronger than the ones before. When it passed, she looked at Takoda with fear in her eyes. "They're getting closer together. The baby may not wait for us to reach safety." Takoda's face was grim in the torchlight, but his voice remained steady. "Then we will bring this child into the world wherever we must. But first, let us get as far from the ceremonial chamber as possible." They pressed on, the passage gradually sloping downward, the air growing cooler and damper. Occasionally, they heard distant sounds from the main cave system, drums beginning to beat, voices raised in chanting as the ritual preparations intensified. Each time, they froze, listening intently for any sign of pursuit, then continued their cautious progress when it seemed safe, after what felt like hours but was likely less than one. They reached a point where the passage opened onto a narrow ledge, cut into the cliff face. Beyond it stretched the open air, the valley below now cloaked in twilight shadows. Above, the sky had deepened to indigo, the first stars appearing like distant beacons. And on the eastern horizon, a glow heralded the imminent rising of the full moon. "We must cross here," Takoda said, pointing to the ledge that seemed impossibly narrow, no more than 2 feet wide in places, with a sheer drop of hundreds of feet to the rocks below. "Go slowly. Keep your back to the cliff wall. I will be right behind you." Sarah stared at the precarious path, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I don't think I can," she whispered, terror momentarily overcoming her determination. "Especially not with the baby coming." Takoda took her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him rather than the dizzying drop. "You can," he said with quiet confidence. "You are the strongest woman I have ever known, Sarah Mitchell. You survived abandonment, desert, captivity. You will survive this too." He pressed his forehead to hers, their breath mingling in the cool night air. "I believe in you. Now believe in yourself." Drawing strength from his faith, Sarah nodded. She turned to face the ledge, pressing her back against the solid rock of the cliff, and began to inch her way forward, one careful step at a time. The rough stone bit into her palms as she flattened her hands against the wall for support. The wind tugged at her clothing, as if trying to pull her into the void, but she kept moving, focusing only on the next step, then the next. They had covered perhaps 30 yards of the treacherous path when a shout echoed from the cave entrance behind them. Sarah didn't need to look back to know what it meant. Their absence had been discovered. The hunt had begun. "Keep going," Takoda urged from behind her. "Do not look back. Do not rush. One step at a time." Sarah obeyed, fighting the instinct to hurry, knowing that haste on this narrow ledge would mean certain death. Another contraction hit, stronger than any before, making her knees buckle. She pressed against the cliff face, eyes squeezed shut, willing herself to remain upright as the pain tore through her. "Breathe," Takoda reminded her, his voice steady despite the danger closing in from behind. "Breathe through it, just as Nahimana taught you." The contraction passed, leaving Sarah gasping but still standing, still alive on the precarious ledge. She forced herself to continue forward, even as the sounds of pursuit grew louder. Angry voices, the flicker of torchlight from the cave entrance. "There they are!" came Hototo's voice, carrying clearly in the night air. "On the spirit path." "Hototo?" Takoda muttered grimly. Of course it would be him. They had reached a slightly wider section of the ledge, a small outcropping that offered marginally more secure footing. Takoda urged Sarah forward onto this relative safety, then turned to face the approaching threat. Hototo had emerged onto the ledge, a burning torch in one hand, a knife in the other. Behind him came two more warriors, similarly armed. "There is nowhere to run, Takoda," Hototo called, his voice triumphant as he began to edge along the narrow path toward them. "And to bring the sacrifice back, and perhaps the council will show mercy." "There will be no sacrifice tonight," Takoda replied, drawing his own knife. "Turn back, Hototo. This path is too dangerous for fighting." Hototo laughed, the sound harsh in the gathering darkness. "Afraid to die, son of Maka? I always suspected you lacked true warrior spirit." "Not afraid to die," Takoda corrected, "but unwilling to take others with me in a pointless struggle." As the two men faced each other on the narrow ledge, the full moon finally crested the eastern horizon, huge and orange-red. A blood moon, rare and ominous. Its light washed over the cliff face, turning the red stone to the color of freshly spilled blood and casting long shadows across the valley floor, far below. In that moment, several things happened at once. A contraction stronger than any before doubled Sarah over with a cry of pain that echoed across the valley. The baby was coming in earnest now, her water breaking in a rush that darkened the stone beneath her feet. Hototo, seeing her distress and sensing opportunity, lunged forward, knife extended toward Takoda's chest. And from the cave entrance came a new voice, powerful and commanding. "Enough!" Chief Maka stood silhouetted against the torchlight, his arms raised, his face terrible in its fury. "Hototo! Stand down!" But Hototo, too committed to his attack to stop, collided with Takoda on the narrow ledge. The two men grappled, their bodies teetering dangerously close to the edge as they fought for control of their knives. Sarah could only watch in horror, paralyzed by pain and fear, as Takoda's foot slipped on the rain-slick stone. For one heart-stopping moment, both men hung suspended at the brink of the precipice, their figures stark against the blood-red moon. Then, with a cry that would haunt Sarah's dreams forever, they toppled over the edge, plummeting into the darkness below. "Takoda!" Sarah screamed, the sound tearing from her throat as another contraction seized her body, driving her to her knees on the stone outcropping. Through a haze of pain and grief, she was dimly aware of Chief Maka racing along the ledge toward her, of hands reaching to steady her, of voices raised in alarm and confusion. But all she could see was Takoda's face in that final moment, his eyes meeting hers across the distance, filled not with fear, but with a love so profound it transcended the boundaries of life and death. And as the full moon rose higher in the night sky, Sarah Mitchell wept for what she had found and lost in the span of a single week, even as new life fought to emerge from her body in the shadow of that terrible fall. Pain, unlike anything Sarah had ever known, tore through her body, wave after relentless wave. The world had narrowed to this: the rough stone beneath her, the night wind on her sweat-slicked skin, and the overwhelming urge to push. Somewhere beyond the haze of agony, voices murmured in Apache, hands supported her back, cool cloths bathed her forehead. "Takoda!" she gasped between contractions, tears streaming down her face. "Please!" "Takoda!" "Hush, child!" came Nahimana's voice, steady and close to her ear. "Focus on bringing your little one into this world. Nothing else matters now." But everything mattered. Takoda falling into the darkness, the sacrifice abandoned, the tribe divided, the future uncertain. Yet the medicine woman was right. The child demanded her complete attention, her body working with ancient wisdom to bring new life forth, even as death had claimed the man she loved. "Push now," Nahimana instructed as another contraction built. "The baby comes." Sarah bore down with all her remaining strength, a primal scream tearing from her throat. The pressure built to an impossible peak, then suddenly released in a rush of fluid and movement. A moment of silence, then. A cry, thin and indignant, but strong, alive. "A daughter," Nahimana announced, her weathered hands working quickly to clear the infant's airways, to wrap her in a soft deerskin blanket, strong like her mother. The medicine woman placed the tiny bundle in Sarah's trembling arms. Through tears, Sarah beheld her daughter's face for the first time, skin a shade between her own paleness and Takoda's copper, a dusting of dark hair, and eyes that, when they briefly flickered open, revealed a deep blue-black like the night sky. "She's beautiful," Sarah whispered, pressing her lips to the baby's forehead. "Hello, little one. Your father would have loved you so." Chief Marker knelt beside them, his face solemn in the moonlight. "She carries the blood of two worlds," he said softly. "Perhaps she will help build bridges where now there are only chasms." Sarah looked up at him, suddenly remembering their precarious position on the cliff ledge. "We can't stay here," she said, fear returning as she clutched her newborn closer. "No," the chief agreed, "but the path ahead is safer, wider." "Can you walk? With help?" Sarah doubted it, her body completely drained from the birth, but she nodded anyway. "For my daughter, I can do anything." As several women helped Sarah to her feet, supporting her weight between them, a shout came from below, faint but distinct in the still night air. "Here, I found him. He's alive." Sarah's heart leapt painfully in her chest. "Takoda," she breathed, hardly daring to hope. Chief Marker moved to the edge, peering down into the darkness. "Ahote," he called. "What do you see?" "Takoda lives," came the reply, stronger now. "He fell onto a ledge 20 feet down. His leg is broken, but he breathes." A murmur ran through the gathered Apache, some crossing themselves in their traditional manner, others looking to the blood-red moon with new understanding. The chief's face was transformed by relief, years seeming to fall away as he turned back to Sarah. "The spirits have spoken," he declared. "This night was not meant for death, but for life." Dawn broke over Monument Valley, painting the red rock formations in hues of gold and amber. In the high caves, now mostly emptied as the tribe prepared to return to their valley camp, Sarah sat beside Takoda's sleeping form. His splintered leg was elevated on a pile of furs, his body battered but whole, thanks to the ledge that had broken his fall when Hototo had pulled them both over the edge. The other warrior had not been so fortunate, his body found at the base of the cliff, broken beyond recovery. Sarah's daughter slept peacefully in a cradle board Nahimana had hastily constructed, her tiny face serene beneath a blanket decorated with protective symbols. They had not yet named her. Takoda had been unconscious since his rescue, and Sarah felt the child should carry a name that honored both her heritages. A soft groan drew Sarah's attention back to Takoda. His eyelids fluttered, then opened, His gaze disoriented until it found her face. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice rough from disuse. "You're safe." "We both are," she assured him, taking his hand and pressing it to her lips. "And there's someone you should meet." She lifted the cradle board, angling it so Takoda could see his daughter's sleeping face. His eyes widened, filling with a wonder that transcended pain or exhaustion. "She's perfect," he breathed, one finger gently tracing the curve of the baby's cheek. "When?" "Right after you fell," Sarah explained. "On the ledge, under the blood moon." "A powerful sign," came Chief Maka's voice from the chamber entrance. He approached slowly, respect in his bearing as he regarded the new family. "The elders have been in council all night. They believe the spirits have made their will known through these events." "What do you mean, Father?" Takoda asked, wincing as he tried to sit up. The blood that was meant to be spilled in sacrifice was Hototo's, not the white woman's," the chief explained. "His hatred, his rigid adherence to old ways that no longer serve our people, these were the sickness that threatened us, not some curse brought by a stranger. And the council accepts this interpretation." Takoda sounded skeptical. "They have little choice," his father replied with a small, wry smile. "Particularly after Kichi received a new vision in which the pale snake was revealed to be a path of peace between our peoples, not a harbinger of death." Sarah and Takoda exchanged a glance, both aware that convenient new visions were sometimes a way for elders to save face while changing course, but neither would question this fortuitous turn of events. "What happens now?" Sarah asked, the question encompassing far more than the immediate future. Chief Maka settled on a low stool, his demeanor that of a man who has come to a difficult but necessary decision. "When Takoda is healed enough to travel, you will both take your daughter and go north to my wife's people, the Navajo. There is a place for you there, at least until tempers cool among our tribe." "Exile," Takoda said quietly, understanding the unspoken implications. "For a time," his father acknowledged, "but not forever." "The world is changing around us, my son. Our people must learn to change with it, or we will perish. Perhaps, in time, you and your family can return to help us find that new path." "And until then?" Sarah asked. The chief's gaze moved to his granddaughter, sleeping peacefully in her cradleboard. "Until then, you will raise this child to know both sides of her heritage. To be proud of her Apache blood, but also to understand the ways of her mother's people. She will be a bridge, as I said before, a living testament to the possibility of harmony between different worlds." 6 months later, in a small Navajo settlement nestled against the northern edge of Monument Valley, Sarah stood outside the hogan she shared with Takoda and their daughter. The evening air was cool against her skin. The vast desert landscape spread before her, painted in deepening shades of purple and gold as the sun sank toward the horizon. Takoda emerged from the dwelling, their daughter secure in a carrier on his back. His leg had healed well, though he still walked with a slight limp that might never fully disappear. The physical reminder of that night on the cliff had been matched by changes within, a new gentleness, a deeper appreciation for the fragility and preciousness of life. "Alora is finally asleep," he said, using the name they had chosen together for their daughter, a blend of Sarah's mother's name, Eleanor, and the Apache word for dawn, symbolizing the new beginning she represented. "She fights sleep like a warrior," Sarah replied with a smile, leaning into him as his arms circled her waist. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun's final descent. From the nearby hogans came the sounds of evening activities. quiet conversations, children being called in for the night, the rhythmic tap of a weaver working at her loom. The Navajo had welcomed them with cautious kindness, respecting Chief Maka's request for sanctuary and intrigued by the unusual family in their midst. Life here was not easy. They worked hard for their place in the community, Sarah using her knowledge of herbs and midwifery to assist the local healer, Takoda, hunting and helping construct new dwellings. They were neither fully accepted nor rejected, existing in a space between worlds, much like their daughter. "Do you ever regret it?" Sarah asked softly, the question that sometimes still haunted her quiet moments. "Giving up your place among your people for us." Takoda turned to face her, his dark eyes reflecting the last golden rays of sunlight. "My place is with you and Alora," he said simply. "I regret Hototo's death, needless as it was. I regret the pain my father bears, caught between tradition and change, but you," he touched her cheek gently, "you and our daughter, never." Sarah leaned into his touch, her heart full. In the distance, a lone eagle soared against the darkening sky, its wings spread wide in silent freedom. Like that eagle, she had found her path, unexpected, challenging, but ultimately right. And as the first stars appeared above Monument Valley, Sarah Mitchell, once abandoned and alone, stood surrounded by love, her daughter secure against her father's back, her future unwritten but full of promise. In the red earth and stone of this ancient land, they had found not just survival, but belonging. And in each other, they had discovered a truth that transcended the boundaries of culture and blood, that love, when genuine and brave, could indeed conquer all.